talking about bringing peace to Afghanistan, we have a pretty big announcement, and this is something that I think we talked about on Foreign Policy Focus now in the early episodes of this show, which is that William Ruger is the hopefully new ambassador to Afghanistan. Will Ruger has a history with the Charles Koch Institute and was a naval officer decorated for her service in Afghanistan. And as Pat Buchanan points out in this article, has long championed a non-interventionist foreign policy. Now, I don't think Will Ruger is Will Porter, not to get the two confused or anything like that on foreign policy and anti-war ideas. However, he does want to get the hell out of Afghanistan, and so I think, well, Pat's article here at Anti-War may be just a little optimistic overall about, what he thinks this means for Trump's foreign policy overall. This, I think, to both me and you, Will, is very encouraging to see, the placement of Ruger as ambassador to Afghanistan, and along with naming Doug McGregor ambassador to Germany. So, assuming both of those get approved, let's talk a little bit about what that could mean for policy, specifically in Afghanistan, but we can mention Germany as well.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, unfortunately, this is kind of coming late in Trump's term, like to where it would, not, if he loses in November, this might not make any difference at all. And of course, that also like depends on whether the Senate confirms him, which I'm actually not even sure when that's supposed to happen. I was trying to look for a date for the Senate confirmation for Ruger, and I can't find anything. I'm not even sure when they're supposed to do that. But nonetheless, like if this guy does get in there, I think it does, he certainly could push things in a good direction. I think like it's better to have a like more non-interventionist ambassador there than one who's going to constantly be going to the president saying like, we need more troops. We need more bloodshed. But yeah, I mean, this Ruger guy has shown pretty good like chops on Afghanistan. Like he's been arguing to get out of the country 100% even before there was a peace deal or any kind of withdrawal deal at all with the Taliban. He was just saying, just do it yesterday, like as soon as possible. We just need to get out and end this war now. And that is kind of consistent with his, like you mentioned, he's involved with the Charles Koch Institute. He's also some kind of foreign policy researcher at Cato. So he is kind of in like the Beltway libertarian like orbit, like he's kind of in that world. And so like his positions do seem to reflect that. He's also backed Trump's like, overtures toward getting out of Syria. So I think that also kind of like sets him apart from a lot of the foreign policy establishment. Like that issue of Syria is kind of like, I don't know, you can kind of tell where somebody stands depending on where they stand on the Syria issue. And the fact that he's just 100% like behind just getting out of there, I think that does kind of bode well for his like overall stance on these questions. Again, it is true that ambassadors, it's not as if they're, single-handedly making policy. But again, they're in an influential position to the president to where like I'd rather have a dove in there than a hawk, obviously.
Right. Well, I think especially when you look at Trump's administration, and it seems that he is able to be influenced, but does have these tendencies to be non-interventionist or at least less interventionist than others. And to have the personnel and the positions needed to carry out those policies is, I think, something that's really prevented Trump's, some of his non-interventionist tendencies from taking over and actually, having anything happen on the ground. So having, this person that, this position is going to facilitate that rather than hinder it, which is what I think most other ambassadors end up doing it in this case. Same thing with Doug McGregor, where you now have this situation where he's hopefully going to end up being ambassador to Germany. But just today, I'm reading that the Air Force is saying that it's going to take them quite a long time. It's not going to happen very quick for them to transfer their stuff out of Germany. And it's like, if Trump was a little bit smarter, he would hear that and then go fire and replace whoever, either the commander of the Air Force or whoever is, like, I guess, in command of the Air Force forces for Eurocom, or whoever, that the general or lieutenant general is that's making that call, and say, and hire somebody based on the fact that in 2 months they are going to be able to logistically get all the U.S. Air Force's operations out of Germany. right? Or whatever, the said goal is. And that's what who Trump needs to do. That's what, who Trump needs to be. And that's who he never has been through his administration. And that's why he says, I'm getting out of Syria. And what, we're a year and a half or more now later, and we still have 500 troops there getting oil that's not even worth it out of the ground. For no sustainable or understandable reason, we're trying to squeeze a few thousand barrels of oil out of Syria a day. Again, had Trump just, when Mattis resigned over it, Trump should have said, good, I want to save American soldiers' lives. You obviously don't. I'm going to hire a Secretary of Defense who understands how to bring U.S. troops home, and then went and hired Dub Bandow. Instead, he went to, I think, Lockheed first and hired, or Boeing first and hired Patrick Shanahan, and then went to Raytheon and hired Mark Esper, who are, the same kind of warmongers that Trump, 2 weeks ago or a week ago now was bashing in his speech, along with the top brass of the military, saying that, the problem is that you generals go then work for these, corporate lobbyists through the revolving door, all these weapons makers, and then you push more war. And then he hires them to be a Secretary of Defense, and he warns what the hell is going on in his administration. It's just unbelievable that, it should be obvious now. And maybe, these hirings are signs that it even is getting a little bit more obvious to Trump. But I'm not quite as optimistic as Pat Buchanan is yet. We'll go with that.
Yeah, agreed, definitely. Yeah, Trump definitely needs to exercise more of his like apprentice muscles, where he needs to fire people when they don't carry out his vision.
I never watched the show, but I remember the "you're fired" line, and yeah,
that's all
I've
I know
been
about
really
too.
disappointed we haven't gotten one of those as president. We kind of did with
What the
James
hell?
Comey, but it wasn't like the classic like, you're fired. Like, I can't do the Trump accent thing, but he does, the "you're fired" thing. That's
Right.
fantastic. Like, he could have done it to Comey, he could have done it to Mattis, he could have done it to
He
McCabe.
kind of did it to Bolton a little bit. He said like Bolton's service will no longer be required. He said on
Right.
Twitter,
I
but
want
still,
the
it's not.
line.
You're
I
fired.
want the line. Yeah. That would have been fantastic for John Bolton.